All right. Yes, sir. Okay, I hear you. And we are live. Yes, sir. Cool. Great to meet you, William Ramsey, everyone.
Nice to meet you as well.
Would like to thank William for coming on. Can you see me, sir?
I just did. I just lost it. I don't know what happened. Yes, now I can.
All right. Well, we're very, very honored to have you. I know my name says John McMahon. I am not Johnny Iron. I know you guys are good friends.
I know what he looks like, so I wasn't expecting to see him. So.
Okay. He said he wanted to come on, but he's got to work on the truck right now. So he's really excited.
That's all good. He said he would be listening in, so hopefully that will suffice.
Yes, he will. Absolutely. And just want to thank you for coming on. This is Spirit Wars. I'm Michael Basham. We're on the Fringe Radio Network, and it's a great honor and pleasure to have you here. And obviously you've been interviewed by Skywatch TV. I grabbed their thumbnail because it's a great picture of you, and you look great, sir. And it's a really big honor to meet you, and been studying your work. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
And I see that you are an attorney as well. That's very good timing.
So I am a member of the State Bar of California. So I do, I'm careful about what I say and what I'm allowed to say, stuff like that. But yeah, I became a member of the bar in 1998. So it's been 20 years. 20 years of members paying dues. Inactive, you still have to pay dues.
Wow. Well, and so that must have been when you were 15. I guess you passed the bar.
Exactly right. I was one of the earliest members that passed the bar. So I was actually 13. So just to clarify that.
I see.
I wish. I was 29. So.
Wow, good job. Well, my cousin passed when he was 18. But still.
Really?
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah.
In California?
Not sure. He was a homeschooler. Went to the Chicago library and just passed it. Didn't even go to university.
That must be very smart. Different. Chicago, Illinois, New York, and California are the most difficult bars. Typically, those are the hardest to pass. I know California had a 3-day, whereas most states only have 2 days of essay tests. But California and New York are generally the hardest. Although I think California is in the process of dumbing the bar down so that more people can pass. So I think it's now a 2-day bar exam, which
that's good.
Is a mistake.
Yeah, we definitely need dumber lawyers, more dumb lawyers, right?
No, they should make it 4 days. They should make it 4 days.
Well, I noticed that, and let me just really quick go through your bio here for people that aren't familiar with your work, but taking from your Amazon store, which you have some incredible books here on Aleister Crowley, and obviously you've graduated from University of California with a degree in history, and these books, these are key. My wife's actually probably going to come and say hi too. She's been into Aleister Crowley before, is familiar with Aleister Crowley, but you're author of 9/11 and the New World Order, The Abomination, Devil Worship, and Deception in the West Memphis 3 Murders and Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow over Humanity, and you also have made 2 documentaries.
My first book was Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 and the New World Order. That was my first book.
Oh, you know what? I started, I read.
You got a piece of that title.
Got a piece of that. And
the full title, it's overly long title, but I tried to put all of the concepts in that one book together because most people, I think, would not think that those, Crowley and 9/11 and the New World Order were all kind of mashed together. And
now you have a new edition of that coming out now, or am I mistaken?
I just finished it, so it'll be out next week.
Awesome.
6x9, redid it, put pictures in, wrote a little bit, so I'm definitely tinkering around with it. I made a mistake when I published it because when I wrote that book, I self-published it. I've self-published all my books, but I literally printed it out on 8x10 paper so that when I went to make the book on CreateSpace, I just kept the 8x10, which is a mistake. All books should really be 6x9 so they fit properly in a bookshelf. So now the book is 6x9.
Well, just the spirit of the way that you're producing this content, writing books is just it's an doing your podcast, brilliant podcast. I was so excited to see that you have an awesome lineup of shows. I've been going through those, and the spirit of just putting this information out there, not waiting for, you know, all the big publishers to find you or all the right formatting or whatever. It's just like, this information needs to be available. And I appreciate that so much.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation, because I did kind of look around 8 years ago when I published my first book, and the offers I was getting were like 10 cents on net profits, and you'd lose, you'd lose kind of authority over the information, and somebody else would edit it and blah, all this other things that would have made it very onerous and overly complex for me. Now I just keep total control. And also, I say, I don't want people tell me, you should really just write a book about Aleister Crowley and take 9/11 out of it, and this whole new world order concept. And I said, no, but I think that my thesis is that all that stuff works together. That's why I have that book. So it's interesting that you made that comment, because it wasn't like I just self-published on a whim. I actually looked around and went, oh man, this is the best route for me, was to just put it out like this.
Well, for those that aren't familiar with your whole story, and I hope that people will go and purchase your book next week, Prophet of Evil, and he did consider himself the prophet of Satan, which we're going to get into that. But how did you go from being an attorney to getting into this topic, and what was the wake up point? Who gave you the red pill?
I was probably, if I would have taken a red pill, it probably happened to me when I was going to law school in DC. I was always willing to consider alternate ideas and investigate things on my own, but I was in DC, and I worked briefly on the Vince Foster case that, the public, or there are a lot of these people are saying committed suicide. I was there. I worked with a guy by the name of John Clark, and he clearly did not go to Fort Marcy Park and kill himself. So that was really it. And then the really interesting aspect of that story was that that was a very difficult position to take, because the media and all these people were reinforcing this notion that he committed suicide. So it was a tough environment to be in. Like, I'm saying, no way, this is not plausible. There's all kinds of problems with that case. Anyway, so that was really it. So then I was actually a very naive person. I believed everything that, my college professors told me. I was part of the system. I was part of the public school system. So I was just a true believer, and never really, maybe there were glimmers of things like John F. Kennedy and things like that. But then when that happened, that really twisted everything. That's probably 1996. And so then I started reading things on my own, and then I was really willing to, I went through an Alex Jones phase, and I was really willing to kind of do things and entertain other ideas. And that's really how it got started. So that's what kind of that seed led directly, or, slowly, to my first book, Prophet of Evil.
So there might be a slight delay. We're in Honolulu right now. It's better than when I was in Taiwan, but interesting. No, so now, how did you meet Johnny McMahon? Because that's like, man, that you guys, that's the Fringe.
The old story. So when I first published my book, I figured I was going to promote it myself, and I sent out to anybody who I thought might be interested. It's definitely a Christian-based book without too much of the Bible or Scripture integrated into it. I have a couple quotes at the beginning, but I do believe that the contents of the book fit in with biblical prophecy and fit in with the biblical narrative of the much larger contest for humanity by evil and good forces. So I talk to Christians. I've learned a lot about podcasting environments. Some people really, if you say you're a Christian, it's like no go. And then that's how I led to Johnny, which was episode number 20. I think I talked to you about that earlier in the week, that I was episode 20 of Iron Shows.
Legendary. It's like the legendary episode, Johnny too. He's like, oh, that's episode 20. He's so happy that we're having
Crowley in the intro. And so I was on, what did I go on? Canary Cry a very long time ago. So I was on a few shows and people were willing to entertain me. And I was always of the attitude, just to try to get my opinion out there. So that's really how Johnny, and then we became Facebook friends. And then we just kind of keep in touch. Last night we were chatting about all kinds of interesting subjects.
Awesome.
So we're still, keeping in touch.
Well, I like to keep things lighthearted too, because some of this stuff is just so dang evil and horrifying that you almost have to have a sense of humor. And the more evil and horrifying things get, the more humor you almost need to counterbalance it. And I'm coming out of Taiwan dealing with pedophiles and sex cult people, and a cult that branched off of the Jesus people. Well, they say they started that, the Family International, the Children of God. And just, I would actually love to get your advice on some of these situations that we ran into with them. But I noticed that you've been really putting out the radar, helping people coming out of, the Jesus people movement.
I
Great
did an
episode.
interview with somebody. Yeah, she was in the, what was her name? It'll come to me, but I do have an episode about the Jesus people. Yeah. I didn't know much about them, but I learned something about them. Yeah.
And then from my own family's perspective, coming from the covenant shepherding movement, which she mentioned, that dovetails with her cult thing. But my grandfather was one of the guys that helped start that, Don Basham. So then, he wrote lots of books on deliverance that were great, but then the cult stuff started later, and a lot of people got hurt by that. So it's just, you find this stuff everywhere. And now, like, the only thing that really kind of grounds me, at least for what we're needing to do, and a lot of my audience too, is like finding the real enemy, knowing that there is this primordial evil, and that people like Aleister Crowley have really injected that into modern society, and even into German, like into Nazi Germany, like some of the things that Hitler was doing, he may have affected. It's just like,
no doubt.
Wow.
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, there's the 30s there. He was in Berlin right as Hitler came to power, which is interesting. If you look at the whole line of Crowley's life, he was in places where revolutions were either brewing or actually happening. He was in Russia in 1905. Mm-hmm. The revolution took place there. I mean, there was the pot was simmering and then ended in 1917, that revolution. And then he was in actually Italy when Mussolini took over the black shirts in Rome, and I think that was 1923, which led to Mussolini kicking him out permanently of Italy. And then he somehow ends up in Germany in the early 30s, and there's researchers are saying he might have gone there between 36 and 39, which was also telling. And he had followers, and it's important to remember that he was the head of a German secret society. The OTO is not a lot of people think, and it's a misunderstanding, think that he started the OTO. He didn't. He became the head in 1925 after its founders, German occultists, passed away. So, and then he changed all of their rituals to include all of his stuff. But it's pretty fascinating to see how he was. And then we go back to World War I. He's in the United States helping British intelligence get the United States. And word comes to the United States on the Lusitania, and then the Lusitania is sinking, leads directly to the American involvement in World War I, which changes the course of the war. So you have all this, and I've been rereading some of the Crowley stuff, and there's a really good book called Secret Agent 666 by Gary Spence that talks about Crowley's intelligence. But in his memoirs called The Confessions, he's stating and naming names of known intelligence assets in New York, guys like this guy, Guy Gaunt, like people he knew. And so he's right in there. And all of these very interesting things, but like your statement about Hitler, there's very similar things between Crowley and Hitler that are almost carbon copies. So it's really something how he really, and I think his goal really was to influence. He gave these ridiculous public pronouncements in front of an obelisk in London, saying there'll be these great wars, and sure enough, he lived through two titanic global conflicts and resulted in the death of tens of millions of people.
And then he has Ozzy Osbourne making songs about Crowley, like with these ridiculous music videos. I don't know. I'm sure you probably studied that video.
Absolutely. Well,
Jennifer just showed it to me the other day.
You don't know how deep it goes with him. I mean, they're Flying High Again is about astral travel, something Crowley was doing.
Astral travel.
Effects, yeah. So like Children of the Beast, I cover all of those people, like Ozzy Osbourne, all these well-known people, Timothy Leary, Kenneth Anger, all interested in Crowley or following Crowley's tradition. Kinsey, sexologist, was interested in Crowley, and that guy was crazy. So, I mean, it's I think that there's a lot of it is under the surface. So, and even the founder of the gay rights movement played, and this is interesting, but he played the organ at the early OTO meetings with Jack Parsons in L.A. And Jack Parsons is in the show right now called Strange Angel. I was actually talking to John about it, John McCann. He's watched it. I haven't, but you see these interesting tie-ins. That, the whole gay rights movement could have come out, and there's not a lot of details about how much Crowley, the guy whose name I can't remember right now, was involved. But here's this huge movement that's morphing now into not just gay, but stone cold pedophilia and weird gender guides where you can be somewhere on some spectrum. I mean, those kind of evil weeds were planted a long time ago.
I haven't been to the States in 10 years, and coming here 3 weeks ago to get married. Actually, we're on our honeymoon today, so I was just like, thank you, wife, for letting me interview and talk about Aleister Crowley and evil Satan stuff. Well, but she's interested. I mean, we're one of the reasons we're married. We met through these kind of channels, through these kind of networks of, through the Fringe, through thanks. And it's exciting to be exploring this, and we're really interested in taking it to the next level, like seeing, all right, what are we as Christians supposed to do about this stuff? How can we utilize real spiritual warfare, like, the actual living God of battles that protected the Israelites against all these Moloch, Baal, demon worshippers? How do we inject him into this? Because it seems to me that there's an awful lot of information out there, and you're familiar with the Fringe and podcasting and everything. And I've heard a few people ask you this question, but I would like to ask you it in a different angle. How do you see Aleister Crowley bringing about the modern UFO phenomena? And I'll just, as if I don't know anything, what's the Crowley connection to the whole alien thing?
It's an excellent question, and I think it goes back to when Crowley was in New York, of all places. He did something called the Alamantra working, which he would do these workings, Alamantra, Gerensis, these different Algaides, these very strangely named things, where he would do them over a series of days and be in communication with discarnate entities. And he was caught in the Ayahuasca, these different names, the wizard. And the Alamantra working ended up, he wrote this kind of occult encyclopedia he called the Equinox. And there were 10 copies. And he really tried to make an encyclopedia. There's real questions about how thorough he was. He put a lot of his poetry in there, but I think he just wanted to have an impressive set of books to say, I've got this encyclopedia. But in one of the final copies of the Equinox, called the Blue Equinox, there's a picture of this entity he called Lamb, and its Kabbalic number was 71. But a lamb is like llama. It's a titular phrase. It's like a noble one, and it kind of comes into Crowley's attempt to bring Eastern ideas into Western esotericism. So, but this entity, it looks like what you would call today a gray alien. So I would say that is this contact that comes into modern ufology, goes back to Crowley, maybe even before that, into this notion of the secret chiefs. But really, Crowley with this drawing is a remarkable pre-Roswell drawing that goes in. And then, talked about cerebral. I couldn't call myself a ufologist, but I find it remarkable that a lot of these guys who are out there in the modern UFO movement, whether it's Lavenda, who is with DeLong these days on the Travel to the Stars Academy, Lavenda, an occultist who 99% sure wrote the Necronomicon based on something out of the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. So creating this whole myth out of nothing, really. The Necronomicon is considered an occult book, but there's no real basis. It claims its ties back to Babylonian religion, which kind of ties into Old Testament stuff. But Lavenda and this guy Strieber, who wrote the thing of the communion, it's so fascinating because he's using this picture that looks like Crowley in his communion with these entities, but that line between ufology for me and occultism is very blurred, because he's talking about this kind of contact with these entities, calling them extraterrestrials, but they could be extra dimensional. So I think that would be kind of the Crowleyan tie into ufology, is that they're really not unidentified flying objects. These are discarnate entities. People are having dark spiritual things, whether they're being taken somewhere else or whether they're being subjected to sleep paralysis. But what's scary is looking at these. There was this meeting in the desert that they had, and I had a conversation with Joe from the Carolinas on my podcast. But I'm looking at these people. This guy's an occultist. This guy's a cultist. This guy is a scam. I mean, it's not a credible group of objective scientists, in my opinion, who are really looking into that. One of the interesting things I wrote about in Children of Beasts is this guy, Jacques Vallée, who also he's like one of the UFO's early guys, but he makes the argument of these are extraterrestrials. But there was a meeting between him and one of Crowley's main followers, a guy by the name of McMurtry, who actually sat at Crowley's knee and then ended up in Berkeley. And it was him, Robert Anton Wilson, who was a huge Crowley admirer, who I cover in Children of the Beast, and McMurtry, talking about what these extra dimensional entities were. And it's a fascinating little piece that ties into ufology. So my opinion, looking at all that stuff, would be that this UFO phenomenon isn't these beings from other planets. It's something spiritual of a darker shape and form. And one of the interesting things you find out if you study Strieber, who's probably the big guy who had some weird experiences with these entities, that ties into kind of Crowley's views of dark sexuality, but he was also a member or was associating with or made a documentary about the group Process Church of the Final Judgment, who got their inspiration from Scientology, Crowley Scientology, to themselves. They're basically a Scientology offshoot. If you read Children of the Beast, you see that Hubbard's son called him, a guy who was interested in Crowley and used to fondle Crowley's writings before he would give his speeches. So you see this really strange tie that ties from Crowley through some of these other occult influence groups like Scientology and the Process Church to modern ufology.
Now, sorry, I'm muted there. So the final analysis, and that was Joe from the Carolinas interview, is really, really important because a lot of us have followed like David Wilcock and some of these guys. What was the final analysis on him then? Are we thinking that he's involved in, because didn't he come out saying like they're Satanists and they're trying to make me into a Satanist and there's all this Luciferian blah blah blah, and he said he's a Christian? Or
who Wilcock?
Wilcock, yeah.
Joe? Yeah, Wilcock, my understanding of what I found out, I think that Joe mentioned it, is that he believes he's the reincarnation of, what's his name? Not Clancy. I forgot the last name of this kind of spiritualist. So I don't think he's a Christian, but I think what's interesting and what Joe enlightened me about is these guys came out of Gaia TV, him and this other guy, Jordan Sather, and, not really a credible source in a lot of ways. So I don't think Wilcock is a Christian at all. No, he's a New Ager.
Okay.
And I think so. Same as this Corey Good, who is supposedly in contact with these blue chickens or blue spherical beings. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of evidence, man. When you look at this stuff, there's a lot of talk, but there's very little evidence.
Yeah.
Hey, can I record this? I think I need your permission to record it.
Yeah, we need to write all the legal documents, and there's paperwork, and we're having.
It says, please record permission from the meeting host.
Oh, I'm recording it too. We'll send it. I'll send you all the stuff. We got audio. We got Spreaker going. We got Zoom. I mean, the world could end, and I could jump right back in.
I want to put it up tonight on YouTube. Anyway, so. There's really fascinating stuff between Crowley and modern ufology that I really didn't key into before the last year. I really started researching, like, whoa, what's Lavenda doing here? Why is he ghostwriting a book for DeLong, this public thing? And I had a real strange tie with Lavenda too, which not a lot of people know of. But when I self-published my book, Trine Day Publishing put out a book with this ghostwriter, S.K. Bain, called The Most Dangerous Book in the World. That was basically a lot of my research, but their ending was so sketchy and totally fake. And here's Lavenda ghostwriting this, and it's an embarrassing book, but it's just amazing how they wanted to twist the message of my book. Because if you look at the conclusions of my book, totally different, kind of Christian oriented, and I expose some powerful people who are into Crowley and numerology, and they just totally took all that out. So I've had communication with Lavenda. He and I have sent some interesting missives, which I should post again. But yeah, he what did we talk about? I can't remember, but yeah, he's an interesting character. He goes all the way back to this occult bookstore in New York called The Magical Child that was run by a guy by the name of Herman Slater. And he has had all these meetings with the same people I talked about just earlier, McMurtry and the guy who wrote the X-Men. That's why that X is in there for the X-Men. It's actually comes out of the occult, this whole symbology. Yeah, so it's interesting.
One question that I also have is, you have so much work out there, and I'm not going to pretend like I was so prepared that I read every book of yours. It's going to be a long-term thing. We're going to be looking at your work and following your podcasts, and obviously hoping to gather important key intel as we're charting out our course, But have you noticed a lot of people taking your just very, very meticulous research, which is obvious you're just extremely knowledgeable about Aleister Crowley and just the way that he's interwoven into so many different things? Have you noticed like a lot of plagiarism going on? Like, because there's so many people out there that are making YouTube channels and then they write their expert book, and and no offense to David Wilcock, I'd love to interview him sometime, but like, it just seems to me like a lot of these guys, they show up out of nowhere and then suddenly, they're the expert, and you're like, where did you come from? Like, exactly why do you?
It's interesting you say that, because they're placing themselves. So these guys, Wilcock and Stater, start talking about things that people are interested in, like QAnon, these kind of non-New Age things, but they're moving towards what the public is, UFOs maybe. But when I wrote the book, when I wrote it and published it in 2010, nobody was talking about Crowley. They didn't understand the Book of the Law was received by Satan. They didn't understand, in my opinion, the Thelemic or occult numerology that the guys who created 2001 put into the event. So I was definitely trying to, impress upon a public that notion. And now I see people mentioning Crowley. I've watched Jones, who actually referenced one of my videos about Hillary Clinton being sick. It has like 4 million views, but I'll be watching Jones and he'll go, Hillary Clinton, she likes that Aleister Crowley stuff. So she keeps mentioning Crowley without really having, he has a very superficial understanding. He just says, that's Crowley, so he's mentioning Crowley. And so I've seen, I think that, and I've seen other writers kind of now looking into that subject. And, I actually applaud that. I think it's important. I don't, I think, maybe a little bit of, just a reference, polite, like I got this idea. Even they wrote, when they are telling that book about the most dangerous book ever written, they said, this is based upon the writings of William Ramsey. Now we're going to bungle the whole thing. But yeah, so, that was my intent, is get people to talk about that. So I don't really feel like that. I think it's an important subject. If Aleister Crowley's ideas are influencing 9/11 and all these heavy-duty, high-level occultists are doing it, the public has to know. It's very important.
Yeah. Well,
I think that it's interesting, because I think that the real architect of the whole event died. David Rockefeller, who had the money, the juice, had all the connections, passed away, and nobody really saw him. They were just like it was just another thing. The only person who really reported on it was James Corbett. But it was an epic event. He was just a giant in building all of these buildings, the Trade Center, the UN. He's just tied to everybody, a backer of the Bushes. He's all over the place. So, it's just I think the public, the mass media is just really there to kind of create sound and fury and make sure the public misinterprets what's really the most important. I think the most important thing about.
Well, and it would be great if Alex Jones had you on regularly to kind of analyze. That's the beauty of having a network, is where you can be like, instead of pretending like everything about Crowley, now we can just call on you and be like, oh my gosh, we need to get Ramsey on. Let's find out, what does this mean, and Rockefeller's passing, how is that significant to the whole timeline? And, what about this numerological weird exercise that the Illuminati's doing with this thing? And, you can see the whole, you're just like focused in on this so well that you should definitely have your voice, included, and you should get credit for it.
Well, I appreciate that. I think I was actually a person who believed the cover story of 9/11. I believe when they said that this guy did it, so when there was a slow process where the scales came off my eyes from 2003, 2004. And when I realized nothing else going on, then I had to go back to the books and drawing and go, what really is happening? What happened? What led up to 9/11? And what's the numerology? What does it mean? It's referencing ideas. It's referencing concepts. So I think that, if you're not part of these elite circles and secret societies, you're left out of these greater social societal movements that are under the table, right? So I think, I don't come from I'm a public school person. I went to all public schools. I don't have an elite pedigree. So for me, it was important for me just to understand. Like I was out there just researching myself. I've probably never written a book, but I was like, this is important. I think I should put this down and codify it in a book so anybody can read it anywhere at any time. And that's really why I wrote it.
Well, and you don't have like this. I mean, obviously your YouTube channel, you have videos with just millions of hits that are about current events, but you're not sucked into like the latest thing and, oh my gosh, now this war could start. Although I would be interested to hear your opinion on certain things that are happening right now, like the shutting down of free speech and just the whole war against anybody that's talking outside the box. It seems like that's really risen. Like I feel like I came back to America just in time to be a part of all this stuff. I'll stay in Hawaii, thank you very much, but
Yeah, well, that's probably wise. I mean, it's amazing to think that they're actually trying to curtail free speech or try to inhibit people from discussing any subject. So, I think that for me, I got to a certain point where I realized that my ideas, I was oaring along, like going down the river with the concepts in the mass media at the same time. So in a way, I think that that's actually one of the short-sighted things about alternate media is they're actually still reacting to what the mass media is saying, even if the mass media is just completely full of baloney. The whole Russian investigation, there's no evidence. And I mean, the thing, really what it is it's actually a masterful, and it only started after Trump became president, which should tell you everything, but it's really a masterful way to deflect from the criminality, and the stone cold betrayals of Clinton and possibly even Barack Obama, who was involved in sending assets into the Trump administration to spy on them. I mean, it's incredible. So, so if I'm stuck reacting to their thing, then I'm actually just being led along like a cow with a ring in its nose. Okay, come along and, oh no, there's no Russia thing. This is, then I'm actually giving what they're saying, which is totally transparent nonsense, credence, right? So,
very important. I mean, and what I see them, and in dealing with Luciferian people who lie, and I've been taken to Taiwanese court like 10 times this last year. My daughter was kidnapped by these false Christians, and we were trying to get these Norwegians out of the country back to Norway, and that's how it all started. And we really got almost like a metaphysical doctorate in criminology, because you start to see how the devil like twists everything upside down. So if they say something, it's exactly the opposite thing that's true. So, and they'll go into court, they'll commit perjury over and over again. They don't care. They're just so bold-faced liars, and they love to hurt innocents. We're still fighting to get my daughter back. But, what I see with this is like with Russia. I would love to someday, right now I'd like to just kind of introduce you to a lot of my friends and get to know you personally. But I have a lot of stories to tell you, and it seems like you're on the same track with a lot of this stuff. And not forgetting history, because one thing that Alex Jones, that I love him so much, and I'm thankful for what he does, but they're kind of getting sucked into just what's happening today, and they've gotten so close to the White House now that it's a little bit hard for them to kind of pull back and see the big picture. And that's why we need to keep all of our voices out there, especially yours, and just be like looking at, okay, well, let's look at the Jesus people thing, and all right, let's look at New Age ufology, and with regards to Aleister Crowley. And then, with the Russia stuff, how would that play into Aleister Crowley's thinking, all the lying? Like maybe, I mean, in my opinion, I'd like to hear yours, but it means that maybe Russia's turning back to God, and maybe a Trump-Russia connection is a great thing for freedom of humanity. I don't know.
Well, good point. I mean, that's what's happening. I just saw a video of Putin taking place in a procession for the actual real guy, the real original Russian. His name was Rus. His conversion to Christianity. So it was pretty fascinating. And Orthodox Christianity claims the real 2,000-year basis going back to the original church. That it's pretty fascinating. I mean, the Catholic Church does it as well, but and I think that that's the change. I mean, they're taking that position anti-Islam. I mean, Islam and Christianity are oil and water. They really can't coexist. It's two totally different ideas. And Islam and Muhammad himself said that Christ didn't die on the cross, which is an essential aspect to the nature and divinity of Jesus Christ. So, I mean, and Russia's taking that position. Some of these other countries like Hungary and Poland. So I think that religious position as a Christian is proper. I'm not anti. I don't hate Islamic people. I just think that they're under a deception. But so I think that the Russians may be on the good end. Why are we making Russia a boogeyman? There was that big hubbub. The left howls at anything Trump says anyway, but they howled at him trying to make peace with a considered enemy or a longtime adversary of the United States. What's wrong with that? Was that being weak or is that being strong? I would say it's being strong if you're trying to make peace and not have conflict with a country that's capable of doing nuclear war. So that kind of that outrage is feigned, and it's just outrage on everything. And I think that goes towards a larger issue of public civility and just kind of fair game. I remember there was a good podcast by Adam Carolla, and he says the real problem with people is they've never played competitive sports where like you lose and then it's over. Okay, you win. Good for you. Okay, this was a contest. Let's go back. We'll play next week. And now it's just constant politicking, which is part of that whole Russia nonsense. Is that once they lost, they just put a new agenda in. Bam. Collusion. There's no evidence. The people are saying traitor, like you're saying a traitor. With the ex-head of the CIA is calling Trump a traitor. What the hell? Never heard that in my life. That's an incredible statement. Back it up, right? You can't just say that. I would back it up anyway. So, interesting things are definitely afoot.
Yeah,
living in interesting times.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And just again, like bringing everything back to you've done so much research on Crowley. So when you look at something like that in the news, you can immediately bring your perspective to that. So are there any other things like in the media that are happening where you're just like shaking your head? You're like, oh, they don't know like what kind of pattern they're following of Crowley's kind of strategy or agenda of using falsehood and deception and Satanism. And I mean, has there been any other things recently that have been yeah.
I would say like Pizzagate, was never properly investigated. There were all the glimmers and Podesta that these guys are occultists, and there's really no OTO chapter publicly in DC, and people have surmised that chapter is actually at Comet Ping Pong, which is totally covered with occult stuff, witchcraft. The white and black moon comes right out of Eliphas Levi. Like that whole thing in a comet is like very occult. It's interesting too because Alephantis was heavy duty into the art world, like a lot of these other occultists, and he was involved in an art organization out of England that Kenneth Anger and Donald Cammell and Jodorowsky, these other high-end occultists, some of whom I cover in Children of the Beast, are involved in. And so he actually operates in those circles at a very high level. And also he actually was a producer on a film with Michael Stipe, and it was kind of like this glam effete I can't remember the name of the film, but he was all of Phantasms are connected. So I think that those guys all probably are. And have you ever seen the picture of Podesta with Linda?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
weird. There's so much stuff like that. It's like, how did everybody just drop that all of a sudden, you know?
Yeah, that kind of came and went. It was DeLong, Lavenda, the Ghost Rider, and Podesta. So I don't think it would be out of the realm of possibility that these guys are, working on the left-hand path, that they're involved. There's all kinds of secret things. There was a fascinating statement of Lavenda. There was one of for Podesta, there was one of the emails that he was going to do something in the dungeon, which was on like this, the blue moon. It was like the February 29th or something. And I was like, oh my God, that's like, we're talking Damien Eccles kind of moon worship things where these guys may be heavy duty involved, and I think people covered over. And there was a reference to Thelema in the Podesta email. Somebody was asking Podesta for a Thelema, like it was a blessing. And Crowley used that term as Thelemites. That was his idea of what he called his followers. So there was little hints within those emails that showed some occultism. I need to get a little bit of water. Hold on. All right, sorry about that. Well, that he was a Satanist, that he was anti-Christian, that he was trying to destroy Christianity through his works and create an alternate religion for humanity that took them away from the structure of Christian ideology based upon a higher being we call God or Heavenly Father, Son Jesus Christ, and taking them to a state where they are their own God, where every man and woman is a God that worships themselves in the context of a greater world full of spiritual entities and Satan. That would be it.
That's a good answer right there. Tracy Mihalek is listening. She says, to understand the history and the roots, and Marathon is talking about the sickness in the film industry. Like, once you know this, you watch a movie and you're like, oh, I got that. Oh, I know what they're doing there. Oh, yep, I see that. Oh,
right. No, there's a lot. There's so many 93s. You watch these movies. I did a documentary on it was iMovie. It was super cheap. I did it 8 years ago, but I put all this stuff together to show all the numerological references that are in films, 11s, 77s. Oliver Stone lays it down, man. If you pay attention to the intro to Natural Born Killers, there's 11, 77, 66, these occult numbers that reference Crowley's Liber Oz and things like that. So I think it's to be aware that these guys, they won't tell you publicly that they're into the left-hand path, but they will show it. And there's some of in Tarantino's films. So it's out there. And this is the ideas that these guys are promoting, maybe not in open speeches, but through their actions and their art, So I think if you're a Christian, you got to kind of be on point and spot that.
Do you think that there has been a setting back of the dark side recently? Like, love or hate Trump, a lot of these things that were occult in the sense that they were hidden, the existence of the Illuminati or the NSA, for example, were all said to be conspiracy until now. I mean, every single classroom I walk into, and I do a lot of substitute teaching to pay the bills the last decade, and I've been teaching Taiwanese students. I use Chinese to tell them about all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, Illuminati, and they didn't know anything 8 years ago. Now they ask me first. They're like, teacher, tell us about the Guangming Hui. I'm like, how did you know about the Illuminati? And then I'll tell them like for 20 minutes in kind of English Chinese, you know, what it is. They know about it. And I'm like, where did you guys hear about this? They're like, oh, YouTube, PewDiePie. Like, wow. How did we start winning? Like, when did this happen? But do you see that? Like, do you see a shift, you know, back into
absolutely.
like...
I think Trump was riding a wave of people wanting change and being understanding these things that were under the surface and really weren't knowable prior to the internet. I actually think we're going through a process of humanity that's probably as important as, you know, the printing press, the you know, the Gutenberg, what is it, the Gutenberg Bible? Who was the guy who created the printing press in Germany? Anyway, something like that, where people are be able to communicate and exchange information and verify it, that you really couldn't. You really had these spigots that everybody had to drink from, four main like, you know, channels and very limited things that were a lot of them were government assets or run by the intelligence agency or had some intelligence. Well, now that's gone. And you can still kind of spot the intelligence agents that are in the alternate media too, if you're kind of savvy. But I think that people are able to ascertain, like nobody could talk about Skull and Bones 20 years ago. They didn't know the connections. Now they can read it. They can hear people talk about it. They understand these secret ideas that were used to be initiatory through the Masons or some other group, you know. They wouldn't know all this stuff. So I do think that was that change. And I think Trump was that's why people wanted somebody like Trump, maybe not Trump with all of his, you know, kind of interesting characteristics, but they wanted somebody different. That's why none of those entrenched Republicans could win that primary, the Republican primary. They never got anything out of Trump. Was for good or bad, you know, he was skilled, but that's why, you know. So I think that something happened, like a stranglehold on the country of America, that was really operated and dominated by people from Yale, you know. Clinton, Bush. Clinton was coming back, and you know, you can see Barack Obama as an intelligence asset, clear intelligence ties. So, you know, I think Trump was really a New York outsider, totally different person. So,
wow.
And I mean, look at the economy. He did something and changed something from these neoliberal doctrines where you could just ship out your, you know, infrastructure to China and let them make everything you want. All that's changed. It's repatriation, different tax codes. You let people repatriate money at a lesser tax, which, you know, bolstered the economy. So he's making changes that these other elites held in contempt, you know, which shows to me, this kind of cruelly enslaved shall serve mentality. Who cares about the proles? Who cares about the people? They can starve, let them eat cake. You know, we can totally juice the economy, destroy it in 2008. You know, there are a lot of really strange things that happened. The whole global economy literally blew a fuse and almost didn't come back to life in 2008. And I think it was done intentionally by the Bush administration.
Yeah, that was 2008 was when I left the States thinking, okay, this is it. I'm just going to be an immigrant missionary to Asia and just forget America. There's no way they're coming back. And then the whole the implosion happened then, and it was like, oh my gosh, it's all real. Like everything Alex Jones was talking about, it's all happening. And it started to really get confirmed then. But nobody had it in the cards to see this revival of the Republic, and it's just amazing. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you some other questions. Have you done any work with Douglas Dietrich, the guy that worked with Michael Aquino for a while?
I've talked to him, and I think that I've worked as a producer for the Ed Opperman Report, so I've listened to his conversations with Ed, but I haven't worked with him. But I think that his story bears out that he actually did work in the Presidio around Aquino, and the timing was right. So as far as I know, that his knowledge of that is correct.
We've done at least 10 or 12 interviews back when I first started podcasting, and I just couldn't keep up with the guy. He's just literally a walking encyclopedia. I mean, his opinions and things you might not agree with, and some of the facts might not always be straight, but he's just like, he's the real thing. Like, he really does retain all these dates and facts and figures, and said he had some kind of a blood transfusion, and that he worked. I mean, I guess it's possible that was true. What can you tell us about Michael Aquino for the people that don't know about him? Maybe we can just jump into that a little bit, because, yeah.
That's interesting. I think he was actually an offshoot of one of these early. He was an offshoot of LeVay. So he started the Temple of Set in San Francisco, and it worked in Nebraska. But he was an officer, really smart guy. His mom was one of the early graduates of Stanford University, and he comes from intelligent background. But he works. He literally, there's pictures of him with his, I think, his colonel outfit. But one of the fascinating things that he was involved in is psychological operations. And he wrote a leaked manual that came out called From PSYOP to Mind War. And I forgot the subtitle, but it basically is you just constantly pound the population with psychological operations and all kinds of different technologies to get them in line. And I believe that is actually available online. And the co-author is a guy by the name of Vallely, who is also on Fox News as a kind of a expert. Oftentimes I've seen him on there. But From PSYOP to Mind War, the psychology of victory or something like that. It's a fascinating document because I do think that during the Bush administration, some of those techniques were used on the American population. I think that we were all subjected to military level psychological operations over and over again, terror operations, false flags, things like that. So Aquino might have been involved in that. I don't know the totality of what he was up to, but I think he wrote a book called that you can read online. It's very long, but it references Crowley, and it's called The Book of Coming Forth by Night, I think is the title of it. Very long, a lot of biographical material, but he knows quite a bit about the occult.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like these guys get to do it. Why don't we get to do it? Like, what if we just bombard the internet with truth? Like, I'm out there talking to people from morning till night. People that just randomly find the Fringe, or they, the Holy Spirit just leads you to people in the street sometimes. I got my first bank account going, and I'm sitting down and getting, the checking account, and just started a conversation. Everybody's really friendly in Hawaii, so this guy just starts talking to me, and I'm like, yeah, well, he's like, what do you do? Oh, I just came back from Taiwan, and I do some, getting into podcasting, and you ever heard of the alternative media a little bit? And he started to, like, get this look in his eye, and he's like, well, what kind of podcasting? And then it took, like, a few sentences to, like, feel each other out, and the next thing I know, he, like, shows me his Instagram, and it's all, like, exposing the Illuminati and, like, all these things. He's like, actually, I've been thinking about starting a YouTube channel, but I didn't know if I could trust you. And it was like, dude, bro.
I've had similar experiences, yeah.
He was only 25,
Yeah. Once people let their kind of guard down, they start talking to you, and you're like, yeah, dude, we're on the same page.
Yeah. And so there's this whole army out there that we need to recruit. Like, you turn that mind war thing on its head, propaganda, once you start pushing the truth out there. And I've stood in court, I've stood against pedophiles in government offices in Asia land, where they're just, lying and lying. And I'm just standing there like, I don't have to remember any lies. I don't have to cycle through all this timeline that you keep forgetting and screwing up, All I have to do is keep speaking the truth. That's all I have to do. And I have my phone, and I have a YouTube channel, and I can just go live, anytime I want. And I can share this stuff. And they're terrified. They hate me. Because they're like, no, you're not allowed to do that. That's mean. Don't. How pedophiles, they're always kind of like, oh, feel sorry for me. And Douglas Dietrich was the one that really taught me about that. But, in dealing with these guys, you just have to keep telling the truth, because they get under your radar, and they get you just by your emotions or whatever. And I just think we really, we have an army here, and we've got to find more people. And I don't know how much time you have, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I scheduled 2 hours. If you want to go too, it's up to you. I'll go as long as you want.
We can go 3, 4. I mean, it's up to my wifey. I gotta check in.
Well, I don't want to intrude. You know what? We can always pick it back up. I don't want to intrude on your honeymoon.
No. It's part of our honeymoon is getting rid of Aleister Crowley.
Okay, that's good. Exposing Aleister.
But what can we say about him?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back. Yeah, it goes back to you stating like all of this kind of censorship. I do believe that's part of it. I believe Google was involved. There's so many firings that have taken place in the last year that are very strange. Schmidt leaving Google with a cushy job, getting paid tons of money, doing what he knows to do. Like, that was weird that he left, and he was very much involved in the Hillary campaign. And then all these other companies, Twitter shadow banning people. YouTube is actually involved in incredible censorship. Like the SGT report that does great reporting, they are so benign. The dude never swears, never says anything wrong, just has controversial guests gone. And they put his channel back up, but I think he got scared about it. Yeah, he had like 300,000 subscribers. Huge, huge reach. So they're harassing all kinds of people. YouTube, they did it to Richie Allen out of the UK. All these guys are getting harassed just by having controversial alternative guests. So I think that kind of thing is happening all over, at least the States, probably in the world.
Well, what can be done? Like, let's say they shut down your YouTube channel, all these Facebook things. Okay, we've got Spreaker, we've got the Fringe Radio Network, we have our own websites.
I've had no problem with Vimeo. I uploaded my movie, The Smiley Face Killers, to Vimeo, and they never have had me any problems. The complaints have never done anything. It's never been censored. So, I think that these alternate tech sites are going to work. I've done gab.i. I used BitChute. So just kind of leaving little spots. I don't have that huge of an audience or anything, but I'm ready to go. I don't even like being on Facebook, to be honest with you. I would love to lose my Facebook account. It's just that's the most people that I can reach. I would get rid of Facebook.
Smiley Face Killers. You got to, and we need to specify the title, because I found another documentary on YouTube and watched about half of it, and then I realized it wasn't your documentary, and I was like, shoot, at least I know something about the subject. But Tracy Mihalek.
That's actually a mockumentary, but yeah. My whole title is The Smiley Face Killers, who is abducting, torturing, and murdering young men in the U.S. and UK, which basically goes into this whole phenomenon, the last quarter century, 20 years of young men going out drinking at night, disappearing for a week, 2 weeks, and then being found in water. So it's available on Vimeo under that title. And I've had generally really good responses, I think a lot of people open their eyes to this phenomenon. I cover about 50 cases of all these young men, the same thing happening. Out at night, disappeared, found in water. And then turned accidental drowning, which is a mistake, in my opinion.
Right, and even in the preview, and the mockumentary, it's obvious that the authorities are just kind of either they're bought out or they're lazy, because they'll find the body is waterlogged and it's covered with water for 90 days, and the effects of like torture are hard to be found. But then
that's true. But yeah, it's a pretty brutal tale. But they had something that just happened. Really amazing thing, which in one of these cases that happened in the UK, the young man's name was, I believe, Corwell, but the police there researched that case and came out and flat out said they don't know how he entered the water, which is a much different result from the police than they had done in the past. So I think that the opinions are slowly changing. There's a lot of different people working on it, not just me. So,
and that's a good thing, right? Like, we want to have, it's almost like an open source investigation. You've got William Ramsey Investigates, you got your podcast, you got your documentary, you've got tons of other documentaries. Which ones can we trust, though? You said the big one on YouTube is a mockumentary. Tell us a little bit about why that is.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation, and I think some of this misinformation is intentional. I do believe people are covering stuff up, and I think that is one example, that Smiley Face Killers. But that movie is pretty interesting. It looks semi-legit on the surface, but it's all fake, and I think all the people in there are fake. But there are other people working on it. There's a guy out of Manchester who's coming out with a documentary that I'm in on what they call it, The Pusher. There was another girl, her name was Elise Soper, out of Boston, who wrote about the strange drownings in Boston, and her website exploded. It was like all these people kind of came out and said, there's something really wrong with all this stuff. So that was another one. And, so there are definitely things changing. A lot of people are realizing it, that, and there's been a few pretty good books. One of the mothers of the victims, Jan Jenkins, wrote a book about her son, Chris Jenkins, who was one of the victims. So, a lot of these people are aware that something's going on. I'm trying to find this.
If anybody's interested to listen to Janet Wood's testimony, she was in a satanic cult and was witness to child sacrifice and cannibalism and just the most horrible, perverted things ever. And it's called satanic ritual abuse. More and more people are becoming aware of that. I'm sure you've heard of Russ Dizdar.
Sure.
Now, do you think that these killers, do you think they're connected to a satanic cult? Because it just seems way too well organized. Like, it really sounds like a satanic cult, and it's on the East Coast, which is like the breeding ground for that kind of stuff. Mostly.
The guy I was talking about was James Corfield out of Wales. That was the name I was trying to remember. But yeah, I mean, in the documentary, I talk about Satanists, so and as one of my potential perps. So, I think, there's something that's in some of these books about taking people and ritually drowning them. It's a form of sacrifice. So I do believe some of these, that's what's happening, is that these are satanic victims. Yeah, not all. I do. What my basic conclusion is that somebody has found out how to perpetrate the perfect crime and has taught people through the dark web or some kind of means of talking through fetish sites, FetLife or something like that. And that's what's become known as the smiley face killers.
Can't there be some investigators that pretend to be like a murderer in learning and go and how do I do that? And go and find, that dark web thing.
There's a lot of independent thing going on, so I don't really know. I was tempted to go on the dark web or go on to FetLife, and it just was a little too much. I did watch a movie that was on Netflix called Kink, and I think that something like that has happened. Definitely something really dark, like Days of Noah, Sodom and Gomorrah type stuff is going on. I think that the real thing is that men don't think that, and men and their families and people don't think they're going to be a victim. And so I think that that's why people haven't put all the cases together, because it's a smaller part of the population who is that's their target group. And also I think it's covered up because all of these places where they're happening, these big cities, the colleges and all of the people do not want to create a panic. They don't want their kids not to be sent to the college. Boston has a vested interest in maintaining the peace and security of their students there. It's a huge industry in Boston, for example. So they would not want to ever verify that there are serial killers predating upon college students. Somebody actually likened it to Amityville in Jaws, where they're not gonna say there's a shark in the water. I'm telling you, there are multiple sharks in the water. And women. That the other thing is that women are very attuned going out that they could be drugged. I think that that's known in that group, that things can go wrong. They go out on a date or turn their back. They watch their drink. Men don't. And I think a lot of if you look at all those cases, there's probably a majority of all of them have been spiked with GHB or Rohypnol. Somebody got spiked, and then things went south from there.
Wow. And so there's no pentagrams found, etched in their back.
That's interesting to bring up. The smiley face symbol itself is an occult symbol, right? It's used in the occult. I actually came across something of a smiley face shown in Untermeyer Park, where the Process Church used to do its rituals. Russ Dizdar knows a lot about that. But you can trace the smiley face back to the acid house scene. You can trace it through Alan Moore, the book, the Watchmen book series with the comedian who has the smiley face symbol and thinks that murdering is a joke. If you look and read through the Watchmen, and I cover it in the documentary, the comedian is, before he gets killed, which starts off the whole narrative of the Watchmen, he is in Vietnam just randomly slaughtering people. Doesn't care. It's a big joke, and that's what I believe that symbol represents. It's pretty fascinating too, because there was the show. If you've watched Stranger Things, the very end of the show is they show the smiley face. It's those. I don't know. They must. There's some kind of thing. They either listen. I'm convinced that they've listened to my podcast or something for a variety of reasons. One, they included the name of the victims of the West Memphis Three in their buyers, and they put the more name of the West Memphis Three. And these kids are always on bikes. If you watch them, they're riding around on bikes like the victims of the West Memphis Three. So this kind of visual motif is through there. They included the smiley face in that. They included this whole smiley face. And in my book, Prophet of Evil, I list the 77 names of Satan, and one of those 77 names is the Demogorgon. So it's almost bizarre how they integrated these kind of things that I've been talking about in that whole show. And there's a couple other visual references that I can't remember there, but the Stranger Things feature, if you look at, I think it's 8 episodes, right? The 8th episode has the smiley face before the final thing of the Demogorgon comes through right there at the very end, season 1.
And that's, for people who don't know the show, that's the monster, right? The interdimensional creature that just starts killing people.
Monster. They're an upside down. There's a different plane or whatever, a different thing. And there's actual elements in there that show ritual stuff. Like it's fast. There's one of the sequences shows this girl bleeding in a pool, and then the Demogorgon shows up. So there's like a blood element. They show it visually. They don't explain it, but it has this kind of sex magical invocation element to it. I can't remember which part of that sequence, but when I'm looking, I'm like, oh, this is like a ritual. I get it. And then the Demogorgon shows up. So,
and you can tie this stuff all back. I mean, everything.
One more thing I remember about the first part of the series, they're using numerology. They're very clever about it, but the kids are talking about numbers. And I believe they say something about 77. One says, how many times is it? 7. Oh, now I got to go 7 times. So they integrate it into the first episode as well. So they thought a lot about writing that. That's why it's a good show.
Tracy Mihalek, thanks for the comment. She said that it sounds like the creature frozen at Montauk. Well, the show was originally going to be called Montauk, and apparently Netflix said no, and so they just put some stuff in there about MK Ultra. And all of that stuff connects. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the super soldier community. They're kind of new age, but
somewhat, yeah.
Douglas Dietrich has a lot to say about those guys. And James Casbolt, they all have these really bizarre stories, and all of them seem like they're kind of brainwashed. Like, you don't know how much to believe, but they believe them. And one of them actually was found dead in Poland a few years ago. I always forget his name. But huge story.
Oh, Max
Spears. Max Spears. So that was one of these super soldier guys.
No. That guy's totally discredited.
I mean, that's what I thought, but he was found dead with black bile and all that.
I mean, he did die. Some of that stuff is fake, but the real inside story is he was a drug user. And the only people who, I mean, I don't want to speak poorly of the dead, but there was an understory there that he was like a Corey Good type. So
okay, so
nothing was verified. I mean, I can tell you stuff offline, but he was not a super soldier. He knew how to talk the kind of conspiracy kind of smack like a rapper, where he could bounce around and talk about that. And so he found a niche, and he was. Dude, meth will do terrible things to you. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay. Johnny has some stories about that. Listen to any Iron show. Really fun. Love you, Johnny. Yeah. I would also say, though, that a lot of these guys, they're really good at lying to themselves, or they really were brainwashed to believe this stuff at some point. Because
that's a good point. Excellent point. So there may be some mind control in a lot of those people. If you look at this guy, Andrew Basajo, do you know who that is?
Yeah, I'm in contact with him, but I haven't done the show with
Uh,
him yet. But I mean, he's an attorney too.
okay.
He's a lawyer. He sounds really, really like he believes what he's talking about.
Yeah, 100%. I think he believes it. So that so-called transportation to Mars with the that he took with Obama and then fought off dinosaurs. That building is right where I next to where I live. I've driven by there 5,000 times at least, and I've never seen the elevator that shoots you to Mars. All I see in there is a bunch of office serfs hammering paperwork and looking like they just rather be at the beach because they have that building has open glass windows. So the likelihood of that being a space shooting elevator to Mars is somewhere between 0 and nil, and no way in hell. There's no way. So yeah, he's an interesting character, and I think he got his start talking to Ramtha, right? Wasn't he like a Jay-Z Knight? Do you know who Jay-Z Knight is?